We, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the president's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
That was in the Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday. Later in that same hearing, Republican Congressman Ken Buck asked a question that everyone knew the answer to, and it was not a question comforting to Donald Trump.
Could you charge the president with a crime after he left office?
Yes.
You believe that you could charge the president of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office?
Yes.
Last night at this hour, former Watergate Assistant Special Prosecutor Jill Wine-Banks made a point about indicting a president that had not occurred to me.
The evidence of all the elements of the crime has been established, and were he not protected by the Office of Legal Counsel, an opinion, by the way, that I think is flawed constitutionally and legally. I think it's incorrect. It's time for someone to challenge it or for someone to change it. It may take a state prosecutor indicting the president to take it to the Supreme Court for a decision on whether you can cover up your own crime and get away with it.
Yeah, a state prosecutor could get around that, ignore that Justice Department rule. And joining our discussion now is Neil Katyal, a former acting Solicitor General in the Obama administration and an MSNBC legal contributor. And Neil, if a state prosecutor were to indict the president and the president were to appeal the constitutionality of that indictment all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and that state then got Neil Katyal to argue the case, could you argue it? How would it go?
Yeah, I think you could argue it. Both of the clips you just showed, Lawrence, are right. That is, Congressman Buck is absolutely right. On January 21st, 2020, President Trump, assuming he loses, he will not have immunity from prosecution at the federal level. So that's one route, January 21st. The second route, as Jill Wine-Banks points out, is that state prosecutors could still indict. Now, there is this Office of Legal Counsel opinion that is being talked about, that Mueller's talking about. That's a federal opinion. That's about federal prosecutions. But in our constitutional system, we also have a separate set of prosecutors, state prosecutors, and they aren't bound in any way, shape, or form by the Office of Legal Counsel opinion. Now, I expect the president, were he indicted by a state prosecutor, to make the same kinds of arguments that he's been making all along. He's immune, he's the king, and so on. And I think that those arguments will get somewhere when it comes to the trial of a sitting president. But I don't think it's going to get to the indictment part. That is, I think that the best arguments in terms of constitutional law say you can indict a sitting president at the state level. You may not be able to try them for, I think, important reasons. Like if it's 1861, I don't think you'd want South Carolina to be able to force Abraham Lincoln and haul him into court to face a criminal trial, because after all, he has the nation's business to attend to and a war to prosecute. But I think the indictment could happen. And so I suspect if there are state charges that are viable, that those can be and will be brought against the president.
Let's listen to another point that was raised by Mike Quigley yesterday.
What if a president serves beyond the statute of limitations?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Would it not indicate that if the statute of limitations on federal crimes such as this are 5 years, that a president who serves a second term is therefore under the policy above the law?
I'm not certain I would agree with the conclusion. I'm not certain that I can see
but the statute
possibility that you suggest.
Neil, what's the answer?
So I think two things. Number one, I think the interchange shows, and the New York Times actually reported this, that one of the main reasons Trump wants a second term is to extend his get-out-of-jail-free card, that Office of Legal Counsel opinion. But the Office of Legal Counsel opinion has in it some language that says the statute of limitations would be automatically told, that is held in abeyance, so you can still indict him afterwards, even if he were to win a second term. So that's number one. And number two, Lawrence, I think this just goes to to the fundamental problem with this administration, which is they are totally lawless. This president is saying and thumbing his nose at the Congress and the courts and saying, I don't need to show up to be interviewed by Mueller. I don't need to give him answers, even though there's damning evidence against him. I don't need, McGahn, as you were talking about at the start of the show, his top lawyer doesn't need to show up, even though there's a subpoena against him, and things like that. And, this is the culmination of that whole line of thinking. I am effectively the king. You can't indict me. And I have such immunity that I can outrun the statute of limitations. I mean, I can't imagine what our founders of our great government would have thought about a president making such ridiculous anti-constitutional assertions.
Neil Katyal, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.